when you take into consideration the strengths of other people and you give them power to do their work, it's like, don't you feel a little bit nervous, like you're giving away power? And I remember she said, oh my gosh, no. I feel so much more relaxed and so much more free to do the work that I need to do, knowing that they're doing the work they need to do. I don't need to look over their shoulders.
Welcome to Leadership Empowerment with Yogi Patel, the podcast where we dive into the world of leadership and explore various tools that can transform many leaders. I know I was one that needed a lot of help, and I'm hopeful that you will get some insights to help you along your journey. And today we have a special episode focusing on conflict resolution, creating a positive work environment, motivating teams, leadership styles and why, communicating and listening skills, and managing change. A lot of things going on today. And this is the first podcast for the leadership experience. And I am thrilled that my mentor, an expert in leadership coaching, Dina Emser, she's also a founder of Empowering People in the Workplace, positive discipline lead trainer, author, and a friend. Welcome, Dina.
Thanks, Yogi. My pleasure to be here.
So tell us a little bit about your journey. You know, we all have that story of how we began our journey into leadership.
Yeah, it's such an interesting question, isn't it? I feel like my mom helped me realize mine started when I was very young. She tells a story about me helping the neighbor across the street get on the bus for the first day of kindergarten. And it just wasn't anything that was a problem. It's like she was crying. I was excited. I just grabbed her by the arm and said, let's go. And away we went. So I feel like that has started me on a path where I can't resist leadership. Opportunities just find me, and I always have my hand up. So I've been a teacher. I started my career as a teacher, an elementary school teacher, ended up directing a positive discipline school for 10 years. Then while I was there, I hired my first coach, and the coaching industry was very new. It was the late 90s. And so I was so impressed and impacted by that coach that I decided I had to become a certified coach. I thought it would really help me in my leadership role at that point. What happened? It did. But I decided I was done with that and wanted to also jump into the entrepreneurial pool of owning my own business. So I've been coaching, training, writing, speaking for a little over 20 years now. And it's definitely the highlight of my life.
Yeah, I can see your eyes light up when you coach and when you see the pennies drop for the other person. I know that I've had the pleasure of working with you while leading a school, and when I went to two schools, and you had created this amazing program that was really helpful. And when we met and when I was in the conversation of being encouraged, I was a better leader. And I just can't imagine any leader working without having some support and provide that. You know, it's just that foundation or that someone that's just got your back.
Right.
That just changes the trajectory of a leader. And I know that your background also is in positive discipline. Can you tell us how that journey began?
It was so strange. I was actually teaching in public school. My daughter was enrolled as a kindergartner locally, and we just noticed some changes happening we weren't particularly excited about. We felt like the light had kind of gone out of her eyes. We thought, well, let's just look around and see what other possibilities there are. And fortunately for me, there was a private school not too far away, a bit of a drive. But we went and looked. The kids were doing class meetings the day my husband and I visited, and I was sold. It's like I couldn't believe the atmosphere. So there was no opening for our daughter, so we were just on a list. And then late December, I got a call from the school, and they said, one of our teachers was supposed to just take a 6-week leave, is now leaving permanently, and we need a sub in kindergarten. And if you come, we'll also make a spot for Lindy. And I was like, I took a leap, a huge leap of faith, and joined when I knew nothing about positive discipline other than that one visit to the school. So I learned every day by watching and listening to the other teachers, by meeting with the director, by getting as much Adlerian background training as I could to bring myself up to speed to where I knew that I needed to make changes.
Wow. What a gift for your daughter and yourself, and courage to take that leap. And many of us take those leaps without really conscientiously being aware of what we're doing. We just do it out of love. And then we jump into that big pool of lots of stuff. And then, how we got to figure out.
Yep. Yeah. But then something must have gelled, because a year and a half later, the director left and the board asked me to take over. Now, granted, that sounds like a ridiculous ask, right, of the board. But the school was small enough, and I think they just saw potential in the way that I hit the ground running in terms of the learning, and I just loved it so much that it just felt like a natural place for me to be. So then I said yes to that, which then projected my learning and my challenges, by at least 150%. So
the continuum of growth and learning, and so that tells me, I bet in your time in a classroom and leadership positions that you've held and coaching, let's talk about conflict resolution in leadership. So how would we use positive discipline or the coaching strategies that you have come up with to creating this impactful environment and handling conflict resolution with an outcome that would be somewhat win-win or positive in nature?
Absolutely. It needs to be win-win. It just needs to be, even if it doesn't look like it, the atmosphere needs to be, we're not looking for one winner and one loser in this situation. So one thing I know that I learned early on teaching kindergarten and watching kindergartners do class meetings is perception. The perception that one person held, this is a problem and we need to solve it. Looking around at the faces of everybody else in the circle is like, I didn't even know that was a problem. So I think one thing leaders need to understand is that everybody has a different perspective. And so before we try to solve anything, we need to get clear about what the problem is by asking what we call in positive discipline and empowering people, curiosity questions with a genuine sense of curiosity, not judgment. Because if we ask with judgment, we're not going to get the information we need in order to move forward with the conflict with understanding. So that's the first thing I would say in terms of our tools. It's like we need to get over there in the other person's shoes, at least long enough to understand, A, what's the problem? B, what's the focus? It's like, what's the solution we're actually looking for? And C, what role did I have in causing whatever it is that's going on, and being open enough and open-hearted enough and genuinely interested enough to be able to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of vulnerability as a leader, but what you just talked about is really putting ourselves in other shoes and then seeing our own part. And that vulnerability piece is huge when you're basically saying, well, and if you do figure out what your role is, then where do you go from there?
Well, I think that's the first piece, is understanding your role, understanding the role of others, and also your willingness then to collaborate on a solution. But it's interesting to me how many times we just are thrown into these situations with no training whatsoever about understanding motivation in other people and their different perspectives, understanding how it's not always about us, which is always my assumption. I was like, oh, what did I do? And I'm like overly interested probably and overly committed into taking responsibility, when sometimes my biggest thing that I could do is just step back and not jump in. So I guess the training piece for me is the part that's just absolutely so essential, which is why empowering people in the workplace is for everyone. Because we can't assume that just because we're adults, we know how to get along together on this playground called life, right? Or the playground called work.
Absolutely. And creating some ways to perhaps connect with the team, it seems like. So we have to first even know the folks that are working around us and a little bit about their perspective, or possibly because understanding other human beings is a very, very confusing and challenging task. And then in the world of now working from home and working in place, some of those challenges can come through. And I appreciate what you said. It's similar to the classroom challenges or challenges we have in our home. How do we solve them? Chances are we have that same theme. That's maybe our go-to knee-jerk reaction that we've learned on how we solve problems that we perhaps learn from our environment and our family. And what you just shared is like having that step-by-step process that just kind of guides us to going outside of how we've always done it to a specific way of figuring out how we're going to solve the problem and having everyone on the same page as how we're going to do this.
You know, Yogi, when I was thinking about our talk today and kind of preparing my brain a little bit, I went back to the very first tool card we have in our deck, which is the 5 criteria for empowering people. So when I look at those 5 criteria, all of the tools have to go through that filter. All 5 things have to be met. And therefore, it's like, and I can say them really quickly if you think that would be helpful.
Please.
Yeah. So the first one is each tool has to help members of the team feel a sense of belonging and significance. So for me, this is part of being a leader, is understanding other people and what they need and what motivates them. So we all want to belong. I'm part of the tribe. People care about me. The significance piece is different. We all want to contribute. We all want to be noted for something important that we bring, a strength that we have. And we want our team to hold us responsible to actually contribute that. Like not to sit with our arms crossed across our chests and know we could do it, but just be greedy about it, right? But actually contribute. So the second one is kind and firm at the same time, which means I'm kind to you and I'm firm about my own boundaries. So there's that mutual respect piece. Here's one. It's effective long term. So we know what works in the short term. We know punishing people, calling them out, shaming them. It stops the behavior. Praising them constantly increases that behavior. We know that from behavioral science. But this says it's effective long term. And that means that it's developing and modeling for people who we know they have the capacity to become. Helps people actually develop the skills and qualities we know they need. That's number 4. And number 5, the tool has to help people understand how capable they are. So when you have that foundation as your base and you're standing on that as a leader, granted, you're not going to be perfect. But if what you're doing is focused on those 5 areas, you're going to be in pretty good shape, in my mind.
Yeah. It's the timepiece, Dina, what you just said. I remember being a leader and things were happening around us, right? It may be in restaurants or when I was doing my training business or operating a school. When you're understaffed or when you are overwhelmed or you just want to fix the problem, these types of situations, having these types of tools would be really helpful in creating that positive environment that we hope to create.
And, you know, Yogi, I think to your point, there are emergency situations in which we are sometimes called upon to stand closer to the continuum line of firmness. Yeah. So it's on fire now. I'm going to put the fire out. Either in reality or metaphorically, I'm going to put the fire out. It doesn't mean I'm not going to circle back around and try to figure out what was the source of the fire, right? That's going to be a continual conversation with whomever. So I guess what I worry about sometimes when we talk about empowerment and we talk about positive discipline, I don't want people to get the impression that this is all sunshine and light, right? And that you have to be smiley and fakey about being positive. It doesn't mean that. It means positive guidance. It means take time for training, take time to connect, take time to think about yourself as a leader and what you want to bring forth, and watch out for the places where you're learning from those challenges.
So how would a leader who is now listening to this podcast or video, watching the video, and wants to sort of use some of these principles, moving from where they currently are and where they'd like to go. And you're right. You're talking about that firm and kind piece together. How would they begin their journey? How would they begin to take that shift towards having that firmness and kindness when they're either too firm or too kind or not even sure which way to go?
I'm sure that there are a lot of people out there who hear those words and they have absolutely no idea what we're even talking about, which was where I was in the beginning. So one suggestion I might have would be definitely take the training. Take empowering people in the workplace. It's probably one of the most affordable, valuable things you'll ever do for your own growth. You can do it online. You can do it in person. You can do it in 5 languages now. So there's really no excuse for anybody, in my opinion, not to just get the training. The other thing that helped me was to have an external coach, somebody who wasn't in the organization, with whom I met every week for at least a short period of time, who helped me kind of go back and untangle the challenges with people I had been having. And she helped me know my strengths, which is another thing I always have my coaching clients do. The Gallup Strength Finder Top 5 costs $20. It's invaluable information to have. What are my top 5 strengths? How do I provide the 4 things my followers want, which are trust, compassion, stability, and hope? It's just worth 100 times what you pay for it. And then also somebody who's going to help you notice your shortcomings, because that can be really hard for some of us to really admit where we need to shore up our skills or our understanding of ourselves and others. So that would be a way I would suggest to start. But claiming it also, it's like, I know that I want to do better and I'm willing to invest in myself.
Yes. So one of the things that we spoke about is this lingo that I used was firm and kindness. Could you share a little bit about what that means and its place in the workplace?
Yeah, it has a place everywhere. It has a place everywhere. Specifically for work, I will say that, again, I kind of mentioned earlier, if you think about a line that we might draw in the sand if we were on the beach, where kind is at one end and firm is at the other. We all know what they look like separately, but depending on the length of the line, there's a lot of space between the two where we have an opportunity to practice being both kind and firm. So what tends to happen with leaders is that they're either one or the other. So for me, I started out overly kind, giving, understanding, nice, until somebody did something that felt like they weren't even appreciating me, right? And all of the effort I'd gone to. And then guess what happened? I went clear to the other end of the line and did the firmness piece without good results. So I was either mad and stormed off. I got silent and thought, I'm done with you. It wasn't positive. So what I noticed is that when you are mutually respectful, both kind and firm, you have to respect your own needs first. Yes. And then you address the needs of the other person. And then there's the situation. Because just as I referred to earlier, some situations, if something's on fire, you have to protect people. You have to keep them safe. And so then you are firm. Whether you are kind or not, you are definitely firm because you want to keep people safe. So the needs of others, your needs, and the needs of the situation all have to be accommodated. And honestly, Yogi, there's only one way to get better at it, and that is to practice.
This is impactful and powerful because it reminds me of my coaching time with you as a leader. When there are fires and things, you just tend to go to that firm piece. And I remember being so firm because I wanted policies and procedures and things of that nature to be adhered to. Folks who couldn't meet some of those because they had their own perceptions, maybe they had their own ideas, and saying, well, but it's in the policy, it's in the handbook, and we all agree to it. Sometimes that's just not enough. And when we're firm and saying, well, it's on, and then we see, the pushback, or maybe we get the power struggle, or people who think, I just can't do it, I need to find another job. So I appreciate the piece between figuring out that balance, because in that moment, I really believed that I had to do that in order for our agreements and guidelines to matter because of the integrity of which we run operations. And then the piece more is that you could be firm or kind, but if you are not connected to folks and finding that balance between the both, chances are we're going to have other things that pop up.
Oh, yes. and you get to your point. I mean, there were times when, I had to say as a director, I totally understand that you're uncomfortable with this. And I'm a little uncomfortable to say, if you can't make yourself comfortable with this, it's okay, but you're going to need to find another place. So it's tricky in these days because people are quitting right and left, and we want to retain our good people as much as we can. And there are some times when people just are not a good fit, and then they need to be released.
Yes, that's true. Sometimes we do prolong the process and we get stuck into the people business and just saying, oh, the possibilities, and having those conversations from the beginning and guidelines, the feedback, the one-on-ones, the importance of that. In a busy world, we have to make time for people. Otherwise, we're going to spend a lot of time fixing problems, like I think Brene Brown.
Yeah. So I just want to make the one comment before I forget. And what, to your point, a lot of these things will be helpful when you're in conflict. But the truth is, the things we teach are also extremely preventative. So when we have these tools in place, when we talk about agreements, when we understand people's different perceptions, when we have team meetings and can kind of see where everybody is in terms of challenges and ideas, it prevents a lot. So in terms of the long-term aspect of it, it really does prove to be helpful into the future when we have to spend less time doing the same thing over and over again.
Spending that time, the valuable time, taking the time to train, that's a great piece. And that creates a quality, even just day 101. We're understaffed, new person comes on board, and we invite them to shadow someone perhaps for a day or two, and things happen, and we're like, come on in. I think it's similar to your experience. Someone has left, come on in. And maybe taking that time for that onboarding piece, which is a huge factor in company culture, introduction to the teams, the welcoming them to the community. Because I remember going to work for the first week and you're just trying to get your bearings in place. You don't even know where anything is or everything is. And that training is basically just adaptation that first week. And then the second week, perhaps you're open to learning a few more tools and taking that time and just creating that space and relationship opportunities for grow. Also, it sounds like the wonderful way of us creating all of these things we know. It's just sometimes difficult to manage them. And with taking the training, there's step-by-step ways that we can create this environment that's both respectful, but supportive to ourselves and to the community.
Absolutely. Yeah, when Jane and I wrote this training, and Positive Discipline is steeped in this just from the very beginning, it's definitely about tools. It's about experiential learning. For me, there are a couple of structures that are in place so that even after the training, your team has an opportunity to continue to grow and model and develop the skills and practice the tools. And that is the team meeting process and also teams helping teams. Because I think we've all had the experience of doing the training and thinking, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. You get back to work, you're slammed with everyday life, and you tend to sort of forget to put in place the things that you were so excited about. So it's not just about creating a culture at work. It's about sustaining a culture at work, the long term.
So let's look at motivating teams in an environment, because now we have some challenges. It's a key leadership skill, as you have shared in your training. So how can leaders inspire and motivate their teams through positive reinforcement or encouragement, especially when there are challenges that might be happening, or maybe it's performance?
Yeah, I think, again, it's a huge piece of psychology to understand what truly motivates people. So I know from my experience that when there's a task to be done, people like some autonomy in figuring out how the task will be done. So that's one thing I know. And the next piece is they like mastery. So they like to be able to practice a skill long enough or practice at a task long enough to feel like, okay, I've got this. I can kind of take it to the next level. And the third piece that's really motivating to people is to understand how is what I'm doing impacting the larger purpose of either the team or the company. How does it play into the values? And how does it play into the goal? So again, understanding yourself and knowing what your strengths are and your weaknesses, but also as a leader, being able to empower your team by giving them some choice within maybe some boundaries, and also just helping them understand the bigger picture, because that's your job as a leader, but it's not necessarily the job of every team member.
We've been talking a little bit about some of the tools. What is positive discipline or empowering people based on?
Well, it's based on the psychology of Alfred Adler and then his student and eventually colleague Rudolf Dreikurs. So there's probably more research done in the areas of like schools and families. There's a lot of research being done now on basic Adlerian principles that Adler espoused, a century ago, and weren't necessarily attributed him or aren't necessarily attributed to him in current society. But still, it is a psychological approach, which means that the foundation of it is understanding what people need and the best scenarios and the most helpful arrangements for them to bring out the best. So, yeah, for me, it's the perfect combination of practicality and theory.
So you're speaking about the psychology of Adler, Alfred Adler and Rudolf Dreikurs, and communication, that connected piece. And I know you have this wisdom that I'm dying for everyone to know about. It's the effective communication piece. So effective communication is the core of leadership. And I appreciate how you bring that about in your training. And why is listening skills so crucial? And how could it cultivate that? How do we cultivate that listening skills if we're constantly used to listening and solving, which is something that I'm very familiar with?
I think we all are, Yogi. Yeah. It's, golly, I feel so strongly about the listening skill. And again, let's go back. It's like, are we trained to listen as children? No, our parents expect us to basically come out of the womb knowing how and being able to value all the pearls of wisdom, right, that they share with us from the time we're really young. So training people to listen is a highly effective way to increase the skill. Again, we can't assume people know how. We know they don't. And I think one of the things that I love most about listening is that it's preventative. Often when I'm doing a training, I say, how many of you feel like you're really, really good listeners? A few people will raise their hands, but not many. And then I will say, how many of you were trained in some capacity to be a listener? Now, there are those of us out there who are, those of us who serve in a helping way, counselors, social workers, coaches are all trained, like for a long period of time, to listen. And it's enough. Sometimes if you just listen to someone without responding, it's a miracle because we're not used to it as human beings. So listening always comes first. And I think to your point, what we often do is we listen and then we think, okay, here's what I'm going to say next. Here's what I'm going to say next, which takes us up here and away from really listening fully to what the other person is saying. So it's huge in terms of problem solving. It's also huge in terms of problem prevention.
I definitely hear what you're saying, especially about like truly understanding the other person's need. So when you're here, how you're just basically thinking of solving the problem, but you're not truly understanding what the other person is trying to convey in terms of their emotions, what might be really going on, and that putting yourself in the shoe piece that you talked about earlier like really empathizing, just really being in their shoes to see what might be going on for this person. What is it that they're really looking to convey? And that's a piece that I learned with my time with you, surely, and to the conversation that we have on a weekly basis as we explore these pieces. Because it's easy to sort of say, okay, I'm going to go back to my workplace and really try to listen and things happen. But that conversation, that constantly being in that experience, that someone saying, nudging, hey, what's going on? Or actually feeling, for me, when I've come to you or I've come to our groups and we have a conversation about something and someone says, Yogi, and I might have this big elaborate question in mind or a problem, and someone or yourself will say, I hear you. I think what you're saying is, and you might be feeling disappointed in this area. And it just really invites me, when that feeling felt moment, it really allows me to now get clear on what really I want. Because sometimes we come in and we're sharing and we don't even know what we're talking about. We know we have this feeling and all those thoughts are driven based on that conversation. To be able to feel heard. And that's interesting, because hearing and thoughts versus hearing and feeling, there is that little shift that we did.
Yeah.
That's impactful. And in our workplace, if we constantly hear with the heart versus the head, which is a practice thing, it's one of those things. And I really, truly enjoyed hearing your piece about how we kind of connect that together.
Thanks, Yogi.
Sometimes we as leaders are looking for change. I see another person, another leader that is really effective. We're communicating really well with their teams, and we in awe want to get there. And we want our team, maybe it be attrition, and now we are looking to shift and say, I'm going to change things around here. And I am going to do things differently so folks would like to be here. And we start doing fun things to motivate folks to stay. Let's talk about, in positive discipline, we're speaking about Adlerian psychology, the motivation, the behavior. And again, we're going back to the change topic. How can leaders really connect with their teams and create this environment that is cohesive?
So as you were speaking, I was thinking about times when I've been in that position, when I knew I needed to make a change. And you mentioned, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and surely that will improve things. And I think when we understand ourselves and understand a bit more of Adler's ideas, we understand that, yes, our thoughts and our feelings are really, really important because they drive our beliefs. And some of our beliefs, or most of our beliefs actually, started forming when we were quite young, when our brains were not yet rational, when we were taking in experiences that were happening, and we had thoughts and feelings about them that created this belief. And then we've continued through our lifetime to collect evidence to support that belief. So one belief might be, as a leader, I need to appear at all times to know what I'm doing. I need to be the boss. And I need to lead these people firmly, by telling them what to do. So until a leader examines that belief and is willing to take a look at that and maybe change the belief, anything they do isn't really going to be interpreted very authentically, because their team is going to know, you can take me out to happy hour all you want, but I still feel like when we get back on Monday, you're going to be the SOB you've been, forever. So belief, we have to, if we're going to change our behavior, it has to be belief driven, and we have to be willing to look at that.
What you just shared brings, for me, the cultural aspect of it too. So, my background is from a different country, came to US when I was younger. And the work that we do, it's international. We are in over 88 countries, according to Jane Nelson. And we have a lot of leaders using some of our tools. One of the things that we speak about is culturally sometimes when we apologize or when we think that if we give up that I am the boss and I tell you, and if we shift this, they're not going to respect us.
Mm-hmm.
Our team members are going to respect us less. On the contrary, when we include others and, that we talk about inferiority, superiority, what I'm trying to get to is sometimes we think we need to keep that position and power. Otherwise, others are not going to be motivated. So let's truly speak about motivation. What are they motivated by, according to Adlerian psychology and empowering people in the workplace?
We know that everyone has a desire for belonging and significance. So that kindness and firmness, mutual respect kind of all ties in with belonging and significance. But I think one of the things that you address that really is important for us, maybe different from family and classroom, although there's similarities to the workplace, is that often we perceive there's this ladder, right? And if I'm the boss, I need to be at the top of that ladder. And that means that if I'm at the top, there are also people in the middle and at the bottom. And what that used to mean is that I'm the one who deserves respect because I'm at the top. I make more money. There you go. I have more power. I have more education, potentially more experience. I deserve to be at the top, and you deserve to be at the bottom. But what Adler taught us is, Yogi, just turn that ladder over now on its side. I still have the roles and responsibilities of the leader, but now I recognize, hey, we're all the same. We're rungs on the ladder side by side. We all have equal deservedness to be respected and to have human dignity. And those are the ways that we're alike. And then we're different in lots and lots of ways. Culture, where we grew up, how we grew up, our level of education, what our experience has been in the past. All of those things are differences, but we are the same. We deserve human dignity and respect. So you can be at the top in terms of your responsibility and roles and still treat the person at the bottom with dignity and respect. And that changes everything.
Wow. So what is leadership and strengths? I think that piece is really important here. So as leaders, sometimes I know I've been there where I thought I need to know all the answers. If you can speak to that.
Yeah, it just puts a tremendous amount of pressure on us as leaders. And I remember recently I interviewed a team of people in my living room, actually a small team of people who had taken the Empowering People in the Workplace program together. So their team lead and then 2 admin or assistants were there. And I said to the leader, I said, so when you do this kind and firm leadership, when you take into consideration the strengths of other people and you give them power to do their work, it's like, don't you feel a little bit nervous, like you're giving away power? And I remember she said, oh my gosh, no. I feel so much more relaxed and so much more free to do the work that I need to do, knowing that they're doing the work they need to do. I don't need to look over their shoulders. I see what they're doing. I see the product. I know that I can address the process when I need to, but giving up that control and sort of that belief that if I'm the boss, I need to be the boss of everybody has been the most freeing thing that she's done. And her team members are so encouraged by it. Like she needs us, right? She needs us to do our work. We absolutely know that. And we're driven by that. So yeah, it was really, really helpful just to hear the 3 of them talk about that topic, both, from all 3 roles. So again, though, Yogi, if that's the belief, if we don't change that belief, the behavior's not going to matter. So we really just need an opportunity to reflect on what are our beliefs about people and what are our beliefs about leading and how do we define it? So that's something that you're invited to do in Empowering People, and you can also do on your own or with a coach.
So Dina, let's talk about strength-based leadership. How would that play a role here in creating a team? Because I know that the leader had to create this team from somewhere and there was work to be done. So how would the strengths play?
So I really feel that the strength movement in leadership has been huge. And it's been going on probably since the mid-50s, the mid-1950s. It had its start. And it's really full-blown international movement now. The trick is that as human beings, we are prone to be more knowledgeable about our weaknesses than we are our strengths. And part of it is a particular population has been trained not to be boastful about one's strengths. I certainly was raised that way. Don't brag, don't be boastful. If we have an assessment done around strengths, then we have some data that shows us or gives us information about the reality of what we bring, our doing strengths to the workplace. And then there's another assessment that tells us a little bit more about our being strengths, sort of our character strengths. So it definitely is something that requires some information and some commitment on the part of both leaders and team members to observe and be aware, to give feedback to when they see each other playing their strengths. So becoming strength spotters is extremely important.
In coaching, as a leader, supporting your teams, let's say my team might be communication. And this company, it's all about accounting. How would this communication piece, how could I bring this communication piece in as a strength? Like, how would we use some of these strengths once we know those about our team members? So it doesn't have to even be communication, but whatever the strengths we need. So if someone is discouraged, they're not performing, what is one thing that you could share that would help a leader?
It sort of falls into the encouragement category in a way, Yogi, because I might say to that person, or if it were you, I might say, Yogi, I know from working with you for a while now that you are particularly attuned to other people's feelings. And sometimes, especially if they're on the outside looking in, you're going to be their champion. Yeah. And in this situation, we need what you have. And so I want you to draw upon that strength that you have, and I want you to use it for the good of the team. Will you do that?
Yes. How powerful was that, right? And when you feel that someone has pinpointed and knows your superpower, and just to identify the superpower, because let's say if I'm this employee that's discouraged, and you said, and I'm saying, I'm just not, they're going to fire me, show up, others are probably talking about me, whatever that might be, that's something I know I might go to. And when you're in that mode, chances are I'm going to make even more mistakes because I'm trying so hard and I'm just so fear-driven. And I've done, similar, and I'm sure everyone listening, we've all been through some of these challenges, is when we are stressed out, when we're overwhelmed, chances are we're not going to bring our best strength. And then as soon as you just said one thing, and this was not, it was just an experience that I had it over a second, it's like, that's right, that's my strength. And all the other thoughts and ideas just kind of simmered down a little bit. It just invited.
Isn't it true?
Hang on.
Oh, it's so funny when you said superpowers, because I remember a couple of years ago, I was coaching a group of 5 women entrepreneurs in a city close by. So we would get together once a month, and one of them was particularly discouraged, and I started talking about her superpower. And she started to cry. And then everyone else, there was one woman in the circle who said, "What's my superpower?" So it was just hilarious. Then I had to go around the circle, right, and draw right off the top of my head my perception of each of their superpowers, because they didn't want me to get away with just telling Abby hers.
And it was possible for you to find the superpower because you've been listening. And even if we listen for 10 minutes, you've got other people's superpower when we are not listening from the heart, right?
Yeah.
And your superpower is encouragement, my friend. Your superpower is motivating others to see the good that they yet haven't seen. And you just go right there. And I love that firmness piece about you too, because you will also say, as a leader should, really, what do you really think? just calling the bluff, because sometimes we're just bluffing through life of trying to look good when we're feeling really discouraged.
Yeah.
And when we're discouraged and we're showing up, people might think that we're boastful or what do you call it? Just proud or talking a lot about ourselves. But we misunderstand that maybe they're just discouraged or feeling insecure in this moment. So
Absolutely.
Really interpreting those emotions.
And being honest, like not colluding with people and letting them get by with showing up as less than they are.
I know better. You have a lot in you, employee, and this is what I expect from you. And I know you can do better. I mean, it's not me. It's just firm and it's kind and it's loving to say, you know, you didn't do well. I know you didn't do well. Let's just talk about it and move on. Because when we don't talk about it, chances are it's going to come up later because someone felt in their gut that they weren't performing well enough.
And not only is it going to come up later, it's going to come up bigger and messier.
Yeah.
So this is the difference between kindness and niceness. It's not being nice. It's being kind and firm. It's addressing what needs to be addressed in the moment with empathy, with compassion, and with kindness. But it's not colluding and it's not hiding, avoiding. It's not that. So, and it does take courage. It takes courage and it takes trusting that the other person can handle what you have to say. And sometimes we don't. We don't trust.
It takes a lot of courage, right? To move from where we are and being vulnerable to where we need to go. And I can share, I felt vulnerable and lots of emotions along my career in leadership. And that's where the growth, not saying everybody needs to have tears to grow, but just that painful process, like the cocoon, the butterfly, that spins and spins, works really hard and is in a cocoon. And that struggle is what helps us come to the other side with flapping our wings and getting the moisture out to be able to fly. So seeing some of those challenges, and that's what I've been doing, is like, what's the learning here? What's the growth part? I know this is so painful, but I know it's like the yin and the yang, the lightness and darkness. When we're going from the dark to the light, the space below is so narrow, but we're going to get there. And having coach, supporter, we're a team where we can look at one another and say, I know that is very challenging for you right now. A week ago, what you didn't know today, you're aware of. That encouragement, that support, that one person that believes in you in a team. And when you don't have that, goodness gracious, we can also have gossip. So let's talk about gossip as our last topic, because that is something, and again, since we're talking about that firmness and kindness piece, when we're doing either or when we are not being authentic, chances are our teams aren't sure and feeling secure. So if you can share, how do we get to those gossip and how do we get out of gossip?
I think one thing is that if you're making an agreement with your team, it might be wise to address the gossip situation up front. So it might be, thinking about what do we want to do relative to communicating other people's stories. So do we want to allow for people to do that? Do we want to just say, don't share another person's story unless the person's present? I think meeting it head on is really, really helpful. At our school, we had a no gossip policy, and basically it meant that we couldn't talk about a family when we were eating together in the teacher's lunchroom because that family wasn't there. And often we knew that those conversations were not necessarily going to be super respectful or super positive. So we just decided we weren't going to do it. But making that agreement was hard. Holding one another to that agreement was also hard. So I think part of the agreement would be, okay, now we've decided we're not going to share other people's stories unless they're present. What will we do when a team member starts to share another person's story? What's our agreement around follow through and how we're going to hold one another accountable? So you can see that even just in the agreement process, it is about gossip, but it's also about what do we agree to do or who do we agree to be for one another so that we can bring our best selves to the workplace.
And empowering our teams to say, and I'm going to make those mistakes as a leader. And I also want to be held accountable.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
That's an important piece.
Yeah. People don't like the word accountability very well. So sometimes I use the word follow through. But, taking into account, we do this with numbers all the time. And basically, it's also important relative to our premises and our tasks and our performance.
Yeah. And that accountability piece is just a beautiful agreement. So it's not my way, your way. No one's right or wrong. It's just our agreement that speaks volume for how we're going to function in this environment, how we're going to communicate, how are we going to listen to one another. So it sounds like the first basic step to anything that we begin in our leadership journey.
It is, Yogi. And I think, to your point, when people want to change, sometimes what happens is we tend to think we need to throw everything out that we've done before. I think having some small steps, some entry points. So, getting together with your team and saying, hey, I've learned some new things and I want to kind of start over with us as a team. Choosing a place to start that's small and doable. And then you add on and you add on as your comfort grows, because you can't change yourself overnight.
I appreciate what you said about change in a day, right? Opportunities, they don't have to happen in a day. And where we are and where we need to go, that's the awareness that we have. So at least now we know what we don't want and what we do want. And that's where we can create that map that we need.
Yeah. And, often I will say, what does it look like? And what does it sound like? Do you have a vision of what the ideal would be for you? Because my perception is when I'm clear about what I want, I'm much more likely to get it. So if I haven't taken the time myself to figure out what I want and how it looks and how it's going to feel, I don't have to have tons of details, but I need to have done that entry point work first myself, and then figure out, what might the first step be? What might a small tweak be? Because I use the word tweak all the time. Maybe it's not a major change. Maybe it's a tiny little tweak. Using open-ended questions instead of closed-ended questions. It could be anything. Small. Because small things add up.
Yes, Dina. Intention. Knowing what we know now, and with that intention of that change, we can be deliberate. And we have the tools. You are teaching very much about the variety of tools that we have, accountability. Perhaps even before we go to the accountability, hey, let's meet together. Let's come up with a date. Let's find the time. Let's create an agenda. Let's sit together. And I learned this from your team meetings. And having that step-by-step process where we sit down together and we collaborate, we have a challenge and everyone gets to weigh in. And at the end, we get to say, all right, what are the solutions that we all agree to? And now there's a buy-in. Then we have the accountability. And through that accountability and intention and awareness, and there is a buy-in, imagine the work culture where we can now work together cohesively in harmony and through intention, moving from where we are at times where we're not satisfied to where we would like to go, but not alone, but as a team.
Yeah, and just maybe one more point I want to make about the leader you want to become. And that is just for anybody who might be listening. I know, Yogi, that you mentioned earlier, sometimes we have models in our lives. It's like, oh my gosh, if I could only be like that person. And I just want to be clear about the fact that empowering people in the workplace is a program that's going to teach you skills that you can use in your own way to become the leader that you want to be. It's not a cookie cutter. It's not a labeling kind of thing. It's not, oh, here's the right way, here's the wrong way. It, I think, really does leave lots of space for people to interpret it and bring their own style and personality, because life would be really boring if we were all the same. And we know that's never going to happen, but it's not natural. So I just want to be sure everybody hears that, you have a path and it's yours. And it may be similar to mine, but it's not the same. And it's unique and it's valuable. It's exciting for me to learn more about yours and hopefully for you to learn more about mine.
I always appreciate the modeling portion of it. We all are unique. We all are different. And, our backgrounds might be different. We talk about different cultures often, but each family has their own culture and each team has their own culture. In a company, each department might have their own cultures and nuances. So one size does not fit all. And in your training, you definitely give the tools. And what we can do with those tools is make them our own and really use them, because they're encouraging. And instead of staying stuck, we can use these tools to be able to make that movement, where we are to where we're going. That movement gets created. And also using our strengths. Sometimes when we don't see the strengths in us, especially when we're discouraged, for myself, I often say, I should have done this better. I could do this better. I should have thought of that. I could have been a better leader. Hindsight, what I know now is different than I knew before. And now it's what I do with it and how I make that, my own. And how I can be encouraging and not stay stuck for too long, because there are going to be opportunities where we're going to be frustrated and we're going to need time to think and we're going to need to gather data to make informed decisions. Well, Dina, we come to an end of this amazing first session of talking about leadership. And Dina Emser, from Empowering People in the Workplace, my mentor, my trainer, and a colleague now. And such a pleasure to have you as my first host for this podcast, Jagged Edge. And I like that name because, wow, isn't it what we just are always staying sharp, on mark, moving forward as leaders. And there are a lot of things, and we constantly need to polish our armor and our skills to get to continue to learn. And that's what leadership's all about.
Thank you.
If you liked this episode so far, it's the first one. Please don't forget to follow and let us know topics that are really interesting to you. Until next time, I'm Yogi Patel. If you like the content of this video, please don't forget to follow. And also, if you want more information, visit the website yogipateltte.com.